For Creamer Media's Policy, I'm Jade Crockett. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks very much.
There's continued controversy over the question of cadre deployment, with some suggesting that the ANC is appointing party loyalists as opposed to people qualified to do the job. What is your view on this?
You know, the notion of someone being qualified with a job is very loaded, because merit doesn't only mean academic degrees. Merit is related to the context in which you have to work. And in 1994, when the new democratic government was established, they had to take charge in a situation which was not completely peaceful. In fact, just before the elections, I remember in Johannesburg, in JP Street, or one of these streets, a bomb went off and some people who were killed. A year before, Hani had been killed. There wasn't peace in KwaZulu-Natal until some years after 1994. And there was no guarantee that some right-wing whites would not take up arms against the new government. And in fact, there were plots uncovered. General Mayring, for example, had to resign under a cloud, and other people. So when the new government had to appoint people to security posts like heading the police, heading intelligence, heading the defense force, and these were not only generals, these were also political ministers who were in charge, as well as directors general, or they were called secretaries then. They could not take conventional notions of merit, like being a professor of criminology, as the main reason why someone should be appointed to head the police force. They had to take into account the security situation, and they had to ask themselves, would the people who were appointed be ready to defend the democratic values of the new South Africa? Now, people who had been defending the undemocratic values of apartheid South Africa, many of them would say that I will serve any government, no matter which it is. But it's quite hard to get the mindset, to move from the mindset of suppressing democracy to the mindset of seeing yourself as a defender of democracy. So consequently, I, in 1994, would have favoured taking into account who you trust before you make appointments to some of these positions. But my answer would be different in the present situation. But before I come to that, some of the people who were appointed were senior ANC officials like Joe Modise, and we now find that it may well be that he used his position to enrich himself. So judging that someone is trustworthy, even by the criteria that I have outlined, is not an easy call. And it may well be that many of these calls were made on the basis of what the president knew, and he may not have known everything that was relevant. But I'm also saying that in the present situation, it's very hard to accept that appointments of loyalists, and in fact they're not just loyalists to the ANC, they also tend nowadays to be people who are close to the president. So it's not the ANC in general, but a particular grouping who is attached to President Zuma. Now, many of these people we have found have been involved in corruption scandals and a number of other things. A number of appointments have had to be withdrawn or people have been removed. The Commissioner of Police, Cadre, was removed at one point. The appointment of Simelane as head of the NPA had to be revoked, and the present head of the NPA is under scrutiny. So it's quite a complex thing, but I don't buy this idea that merit is a simple question and that people that there's something inherently wrong with appointing someone who's trustworthy. But now, what does trustworthy mean in a time of wholesale corruption, violence and illegality? So answering the question in 2014 is different from answering it in principle.
Have we not lost valuable skills and institutional memory in the civil service through these practices?
See, it's not clear that we've lost a lot of people because there were guarantees, and that was part of the negotiated settlement. There were guarantees for those who occupied positions in the civil service for a period of time. And a lot of these people, not only did they stay, but my impression is that they presented themselves to new ministers and directors general. If the ANC appointed people as ministers and directors general, the old hands presented themselves as the bearers of institutional memory. So if you said you wanted to do X or Y, someone who'd been there for 30 years would say, look, this is not the way we do it. And they put a barrier on what you want to do. And I think that would be interesting to do a study of the extent to which patterns of apartheid bureaucracy continued into the present period. I think the ANC did not have a clear idea of how you develop an emancipatory civil service, a transformatory civil service. There still remains this idea, if the Director General says something, well then that's it. For example, if the Director General were to say the earth is flat, everyone in that department would say the earth is flat, because hierarchies that were inherited, that's part of the Weberian model of bureaucracy, that once you transmit something downwards, it will be uniform. So if the DG has said the earth is flat, it's very important that right down to the bottom they say that the earth is flat. But in my view, what we need is a democratic bureaucracy whereby people at the bottom have an input and they say, the directive that we've been given is X, but what I'm encountering on the ground is something else, and that gets fed upwards. So there has been this problem that I don't think so many good people were lost, although it may well be that people left and there were specialized tasks for which people were not adequately trained. I think it's important when you appoint people to positions that you equip them with the skills that are required so that they're not set up for failure, so that people don't say, oh, this is an affirmative action appointment, because that is very upsetting and demoralizing to people. But I think that we need to also understand that the experience that some people brought as ANC cadre deployments was often an experience that could not have been acquired in universities. Thank you.
When you say that we need to establish a democratic bureaucracy in the civil service, how would you say that we could go about doing that?
Well, you need a democratic culture in general. And what I feel is at the moment that democratic culture is under attack. And you need a situation, a democratic culture is a bureaucracy which isn't only top-down, which places value on what people contribute at every level. And let's say take the intelligence service, for example, which is one where decisions have to be taken quickly sometimes, and they are not taken democratically. But even there, with an emergency type situation, you may make the wrong decision if you don't hear what people have found out, people who are working in the area about which you're making a decision. So it's quite important to recognize that democratic meaning coming from the bottom as well as the top is also often most efficient.
And then to add to that, since we are 20 years into democracy, which is seemingly a long time, do you think there is hope for a shift in political culture towards a more democratic mindset?
Well, this is part of a much broader question, and in other interviews that I've done and articles I've written for Polity, what I've been arguing is if we want to recover the democratic values and restore confidence in the institutions, we need to try and build a broad movement of all citizens who are concerned with defending the Constitution and building these values.
Thank you for being with us and for your insights.
Thanks
Appreciate
very much.
it.
Thank you very much.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking about politics in South Africa.